La Union Cultural Institute was established on September 18, 1931, with only 10 people. The original founders were Mr. So Kyung, Mr. Arsenio D. Kim Soy, Mr. Ang Kia, Mr. Chan Lin Chao, and Mr. Chan Leoncio. The warehouse of Mr. Chan Shu Hyo was used as a temporary classroom, and Mr. Yu Bon Gyo was hired as the principal. In 1941, the founders organized the first Board of Trustees, electing Mr. Chan Lin Yok as the first chairman, with Mr. So Kyung, Mr. D. Chong Sun, Mr. D. Ke Hyo, General Lee Tiak Chai, and Mr. Antonio Lim as members. Months later, Mr. Chan Kok Ching took over as principal, and the school was able to acquire the house and lot now owned by the Alfonso Lim family as its main building. During the Japanese occupation of 1941, the school stopped operations. But by the end of the war in 1945, the school was fortunate to not have been destroyed by Japanese bombardments in San Fernando. In fact, it was one of the few building structures left. Director D. Chong Sun then initiated the revival of the school and hired the services of Mr. Te Hua Lian as principal. In 1947, Mr. Leoncio Chan was elected chairman of the Board of Trustees and served from 1947 up to 1950. In 1949, Mr. Juan Chan took over as principal, improved the old school building, and installed a new basketball court and drilling ground for the Boy Scouts. In 1950, Mr. D. Ke Hyo was elected chairman of the Board of Trustees. He initiated and organized a construction committee for a new building at its present site. The members of this construction committee were Mr. Francisco Ting Sr., Mr. Antonio Lim, Mr. Chia Chimpua, and Mr. So Kyung. The construction started in October 1950 and was finished and inaugurated in March 1951. In 1954, a high school department was added for both Chinese and English instruction. In 1956, under the leadership of Mr. Francisco Ting Sr., the second school building was constructed, now housing the kinder classrooms and a dormitory for volunteer teachers from China. In 1963, Mr. D. Ke Hyo and Mr. Francisco Ting Sr. donated funds for the construction of the third school building, a two-story concrete building named after their birthplace, Chu-Su, in China. Mr. Francisco Ting served 17 years as chairman of the board up to 1968 and was succeeded by Mr. Antonio Lim from 1968 to 1973 and Mr. Benito Gapuste in 1973. In 1989, the La Union Cultural Institute Alumni Association was revived and a new set of officers headed by President Juanito Lim was inducted. August 1989 marked the beginning of an active role of the Alumni Association in the development of the school. Its initial project was a fundraising activity to put up a gymnasium. The gym was completed in 1990. And during that same year, a 98 square meter lot beside the school was purchased and donated by the Alumni Association. In partnership with the Board of Trustees under the presidency of C. Lin Chan, the lot was transformed into a multi-level stage which was finished in 1991. In 1992, the Board of Trustees, headed by Mr. C. Lin Chan and the Alumni Association President, Victor D., began soliciting donors from members of the board, alumni, and a number of Filipino-Chinese businessmen and organizations in the community. In 1993, construction of the fourth and newest building started. The construction committee was chaired by Board of Trustees President Mr. C. Lin Chan and co-chaired by Alumni President Victor D. and included members Mr. Benjamin Ang, Mr. Aldrico D., Mr. Pio Di Quianco, and Alumni Past President Juanito Lim. The building was finished and inaugurated in December 1994. This new building, aside from having classrooms for students, also became a source of income for the school, as several of its commercial spaces were rented out. In 1996, an auditorium was built on the top floor under the leadership of Alumni Association President Rudy Chu. And finally, in 2002, during the presidency of Mrs. Anita C., all the classrooms of the La Union Cultural Institute were air-conditioned. But it does not stop there. With the continued support of generous alumni, we continually strive to make the La Union Cultural Institute as the top school in the region.